Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter. This is the show where we sit here and I regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happens. So today, we move to a story, a rather short story, but an important one nonetheless, in which I break a cruel streak of misfortune and win honor of the day. So, you're going to need a little bit of context for this story. I used to work at a printing press for a company called Publishers. Now, they have since closed up shop because they would print like newspapers and in the mail ads and all kinds of things like that. But the area where they were stationed, newspaper was kind of just dying. Customers were dropping like flies, and eventually they just folded up. Now, after they folded up, a lot of the gigantic factory-sized rolls of paper that they were working with just kind of dropped off the map. They were destined for destruction. You could grab one and take it home if you wanted to. They popped up at local flea markets. These things were like 2 tons, some of them, but the small ones that were like 95% used up, they were chest high, relatively thick paper that just hadn't been used. They hadn't been put through the machines. And they made really great like sketch paper, like draw paper, things like that. Not for like proper pieces of art. Again, this was like paper you would see for newspapers or like cheap ads or flyers. So it wasn't something you would paint a masterpiece on. But, like, you could sling this thing over a whole picnic table and then have, like, a dozen small children draw all over it every which way. And it was really great. What I didn't know, that one of my buddies, Quentin, whom I've mentioned before, the polar opposite of myself as a DM, flies by the seat of his pants, all that good stuff, had purchased one of these at a local flea market and brought it home. And was using it as like a tablecloth for when his friends came over to play D&D or other Pathfinder, different kinds of tabletop games and stuff like that, because he had a very fancy dining room table. He didn't want it to get scratched or anything like that. So he put a tablecloth on the table, and then he would unroll like 15 feet of paper from a roll that's chest high and throw it over the whole thing. And we could make battle notes on it and draw grids if we wanted to, sketch things when it's not your turn and things like that. And I believe it was one of the summers that I came home from college. Like, I was there for like a long weekend, like 4 or 5 days. And Quentin called me up and said, "Hey, we're having a D&D game. Do you want to come by?" And they're in the middle of a campaign. They've got established characters with established factions and all kinds of different stuff. I said, "Hey, you want to come in for like one game just so you can say you've been there?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll roll up something in like 10 minutes and we'll just see what happens." Just so they can say, Tony participated in this one game. So I'm sure you guys have, at least some of you guys have done that before, where you drop in on like session 8 and you have no idea what's going on, but you just kind of roll with it. Or you're there for one game and then you're gone because of circumstances, or you drop out, or you don't gel with the group. Things happen, but I got invited to stand in for this one game as like a 6th or a 7th player. It was a fairly large group at the time, but I get to Quentin's house like an hour and a half early. We're talking about the latest dot hack games, and we were really into like PlayStation 2 JRPGs back then. So we both had like giant stacks, and we're trying to figure out which one we want to play next, and trading and talking back and forth. And I was like, "Oh wait, I have to roll up a character. We've only got like 20 minutes before the guys get here." So I go over to the table, which is, again, covered with this gigantic slab of paper from this big roll. And I was like, "Hey, I used to work with those before Publishers folded up." And he goes, "Yeah, I got one of these at the flea market. It's pretty cool." And I go, "Well, I guess I'm just going to sit here And we didn't have a working printer at the time, so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make my character sheet right here on the tablecloth, or on the table paper. So in the span of about 10 or 15 minutes, I slam through character creation to make a knight. Now, if I remember right, knights are in like the Player's Handbook 2 for D&D 3.5. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but they're a basic character class that can do a lot of different things. They're basically fighters mixed with bards mixed with paladins. They have a strict code of conduct. They can pass out buffs to everybody. They get lots of hit points, and depending on how they're played, they can get bonus armor all the time. They can declare like duels, so you can duel somebody and get bonuses to hit and damage and stuff like that. They're pretty cool. They're pretty cool, like non-magic based class, and you can joust and you can, take damage for someone if they're right next to you. They do all kinds of cool stuff. It's a very versatile class. For a non-magic class. It's very interesting. I'd love to play as a knight sometime soon, but this is years ago, so I slam through character creation. I throw my stats as fast as I can. I write them on the table, and I draw like a goofy, I couldn't really draw armor back then. So I just make like a stick man, and I draw armor around him, and then I erase the stick man, and then I put like a pen to it and outlined it like a comic book, and I was like, okay, there we go. That is Sir Knight. And it's like, you want to come up with a name? And I was like, because characters that wear masks or closed-faced helms and you don't know their name are extra cool. They're like Batman. You never learn their name. They're just the mysterious Sir Knight. So that was kind of what we went with, and I made him into a duelist. I think. Or one of the, you have to pick like a fighting style, and there's a whole bunch you can pick from to kind of flavor your knight as you will. And I made him this level, and I gave him like plate mail and a long sword, and that was about it. I think Quentin gave me like 5,000 gold to work with, so not a whole heck of a lot of money. But, for a stand-in for one character, it took 10 or 15 minutes to make. I threw down a character, and the mysterious Sir Knight. So, the guys arrive, and I find out what's going on in this campaign. I come to find out that a war is kind of brewing in this region, and the party is traveling from faction to faction to discourage infighting and to help unite a whole bunch of factions against a much bigger threat that is on the horizon. So, like, there's an army of darkness coming that is going to annihilate all of these smaller factions if they don't stand together under one banner. But they hate each other, so the party has to go back and forth, fighting all these small battles, keeping the children apart until the big bad shows up and they realize they need to work together. So they're playing diplomats, they're playing politicians, they're fighting anybody who tries to start a fist fight in the middle of negotiations and all kinds of crap like that. So there's a lot of different people involved, and one of the people that they have not been able to get a hold of is who they are approaching today when I show up. So it turns out that this guy doesn't leave his war tent very often. When he is on the move with his faction, he's going to travel between these mountains and stuff, but an army is only as fast as its slowest supply cart. So they stop to let everybody catch up for a few days, and the party wants to go in and speak with him to make sure that he's not going to attack anybody. Based on his route, he's going to pass this capital and then this town and stuff like that. And if you've read anything about the Crusades, you know that when gigantic armies travel across the countryside, they tend to loot, rape, and pillage everything to fill their bellies as they go, because it takes months for an army to go from one place to another. God, my nose itches, sorry. But they want to get a hold of this guy and make sure he's keeping all of his guys in line. He's not going to attack any of the other factions before the big bad gets here. You know, there's a fort between you and your destination. You're not going to try and take it over, are you? And stuff like that. But it's very hard to get a hold of this guy because he doesn't leave like his big war tent very often, and he has a champion that kind of guards the doorway on top of, you know, wandering into a camp of you know, grumbling soldiers that have been walking for months trying to get him from A to B. The party has to swing in and kind of reaffirm that this guy, you know, you're a good guy, right? You're not going to let your soldiers run around and cause havoc in the countryside, right? But in order to get into his tent, we have to defeat his champion or to get around his champion somehow. Now, any rogue with a knife can cut through a tent in the dead of night, but these are strong, upright people that, you know, if they're going to make a good impression, they need to come through the front door. You know, how dare you break into my tent and make sure I'm being a good guy when you do bullshit like this, stuff like that. So the system is in the way at the moment, and they go, okay, well, they've got, and again, this is a very kind of like lighthearted campaign despite the content. They've got like a sorceress and a ranger and a wizard, and they have like a barbarian. And yes, the barbarian would charge in, but you know, if you've got somebody who's deemed a champion, one-on-one combat is not the best because they're probably used to just winning duels in the meantime if it's one-on-one. Enter Sir Knight, the dueling spec champion that he is, who comes in with them. They say, you know, we'll say that, you know, you realize you had to get by this guy's champion to speak with him and get an audience. So you each pay like 500 gold to hire the mysterious Sir Knight, a mercenary who's decked out in plate mail with a long sword, and I show him my little stick figure drawing. And they're like, oh, okay, we hired this guy to come in and fight the champion for us. So we go in, and we pass a few drunkards, we pass a few people that beg us for food so they don't have to go looting and pillaging. You know, we give what we can, and we kind of shuffle by into this, and we approach this giant war tent, and the tent is big. It's very big. It's got posts and metal latches. It's got, you know, ties on the flaps so nobody goes in, and the champion himself is standing there. He's probably like a paladin or a very strong warrior, perhaps a duelist. It's hard to tell because, you know, he's there in chainmail, and he's got like a one-handed sword and no shield, so it's very hard to tell, you know, what kind of class he is, like in gaming terms. It's hard to read. And Sir Knight kind of steps up and he's like, you know, you must allow us passage into Lord So-and-so's tent. We must speak with him before your army continues to move on. And the champion's standing there with both of his palms like set over his sword, and his sword is set with the point in front of him between his feet. And it's like, none may pass. You know, Lord So-and-so is very busy and doesn't have time for every triviality that comes up the road. And finally, you know, Sir Knight kind of like pulls his long sword, and he's like got his shield out, and he's like, all right, I challenge you to a duel for the right to go see Lord So-and-so. And of course the champion, that's his job, so he steps up and he pulls his sword. And this is going to be a one-on-one fight. So the rest of the party has to stand to one side and kind of cheer for Sir Knight as they go at it. So we roll initiative. Sir Knight loses the initiative. And since he declared a duel, when a knight declares a duel against another opponent, they get like a +2 to hit, a +2 for damage. They get later on they get like plus armor because you're focused on them. And then of course he has different feats, so like, oh, he's wearing heavy armor, well, he gets an additional +2 armor because he's a knight, and that's what knights do. So Sir Knight doesn't get to go first, but he's got all the bonuses. Again, like I said, he's got a little bit of bard mixed in. with this, and they fight. And the clash of swords and the ring of steel, it draws like a circle of other soldiers that are kind of waiting to see what happens. And, sparks fly between their blades as they rush and they shoulder check each other. And, shield bash, boom! And they hit each other back and forth and back and forth. And, of course, the sorceress is like, be careful, Sir Knight. He could take your arm off. He is a champion. This is his job. And it's like, I am a knight. This is my job. And they go back and forth some more. And it was like a 10-round combat. It was a lot for one-on-one. But in all eventuality, Sir Knight, of course, rolls the 20. And I was like, we're in the middle of like anime mode at this point, doing this big dramatic duel. So I was like, Valiant strike! And I crit him over the face with my long sword and roll the damage. Full damage, double full damage. The guy goes down pretty hard and he drops his weapon. He lifts a hand as he's laying on the ground. I yield. You may pass. Ugh. And the other soldiers kind of drag him away. He's not dead because, it was a duel. He's not dead, but he's beaten all to hell and you can see him bleeding through his armor. So he's pretty beat up. They take him to see somebody with healing magic, and we are allowed to enter the war tent of Lord So-and-so as he leads his army across the plains to this mountain range. And the rest of the party, Sir Knight's thing is kind of done now. Dueling is what he does. So he cleans off his blade and he sheathes it, and then he kind of like stays quiet and stands by the door while they're doing all their negotiations and talking about not damaging the countryside as they go through it with this gigantic force. Everybody stay on the road like you're supposed to. And, not raid local farms for food and rape the women and pillage and just, God. I recently sat and read about the Crusades. There are no good guys in the Crusades. It's been so romanticized. It was a dark, bloody time in freaking history. So that's the best comparison I can come up with, is gigantic armies moving from A to B in medieval times were freaking dangerous. You didn't want to be anywhere near them or anywhere near their path because just the raiding alone was bad. But they go in to make sure this guy's on the up and up and that they've got enough people that know the conjure food spell and enough people that know how to cast Goodberry and all the rest to keep all these guys kind of in line and move safely from A to B without damaging the countryside. But in all eventuality, the negotiations end, and they seem to go rather well. That, this he's pretty good. He's moving into position. He was one of the first, or maybe the second, to believe that this big bad was coming with this dark army of terribleness. So he's moving into position with all of his forces to kind of guard this mountain pass. So they are well dug in on supply carts and ammunition and food and things like that. So we can kind of wipe our brows and thank goodness that this one faction is behaving itself, because all the rest are kind of nipping at each other's heels like a set of angry dogs. But hey, unite under this banner. United we stand, divided we fall. But all the egos are just insufferable as this alliance tries to limp forward. And the party, they all come out of the war tent, and Sir Knight is kind of there. He's got his horse, he's got his shield and sword on his back, and he's like, did everything go well? And he goes, yes. And they go, yes, of course. Thank you for getting us in the door, Sir Knight. And he's like, no problem. Should you ever need me again, call upon me once more. And I know my honor has a price. It does not fill my belly nor shoe my horse, but I will absolutely come and duel in your name again. And he leans and he kind of flips the faceplate up for a moment so he can kiss the sorceress on the hand, and then he flips the thing back down again, and he gets up onto his horse to ride off into the sunset, because, again, I'm only there for the one game. To ride off into the sunset. And the sorceress goes, wait, Sir Knight, we never got your name. And he stops for a moment and he turns his head, and of course the setting sun is in front of him, so you can see like the silhouette of a brave man on horseback. And he goes, "No, I never gave it to you. I am the mysterious Sir Knight. Yeah!" And the horse takes off into the setting sun towards the horizon. And they're like, "Wow, okay." you know, but that's kind of where that story ends. It was a very short, like just encounter, because it was a lot of talking, it was a lot of RP, it was a lot of safely traveling from the edges of the camp to the lord or the general's tent. But the duel was the main part, and I was glad that I kind of got a chance to like show off this character while he was there. They hired him in, but he came in and he did his job. So it was a short-lived like episode in their greater campaign. Did they succeed? Did they unite all the factions against the encroaching darkness that was coming? No idea. But we made sure that one of the factions was doing what they were supposed to, and that everything was on the up and up. So that was the triumph of the mysterious Sir Knight. So that was just a little story. I thought you guys might enjoy that. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you leave me the like button, hit that like button for me and all that good stuff. And I will see you guys on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming.
Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!